I have built, scaled, and sold a consumer app. I've spoken to at least 1,000 consumer app founders that have come to events at our house here in San Francisco. And now I'm going to tell you the exact playbook that I would use to distribute an app in 2026. So the first thing you have to do is you have to understand your ICP. Your ICP is your initial customer profile. It's basically the target audience that you're trying to attract to use your product or your app or whatever it may be. So you have to really understand who your ICP is. Now this gets a little complicated because sometimes your ICP can actually trick you. So I'll give you an example. For our app that we built and sold, we thought our ICP would have been probably like 40-plus-year-olds because it was kind of dealing with religion and using your phone a little bit less. But it turns out after we had done a bunch of testing, our ICP was actually like 18 to 25-year-olds. So it's important that you really try to understand your ICP from the get-go when you're building your product and structuring how your marketing and everything is gonna be laid out. But you also have to be open to testing and open to feedback and realizing, you know what, maybe the ICP I thought it was is not actually the ICP that it is. So once you have a very strong understanding of who your ICP is, you need to figure out where that ICP lives. Now, what I mean by where the ICP lives is what platform do they use the most that you can actually target. So in our case, for 18 to 25-year-olds, most 18 to 25-year-olds are on TikTok, right? TikTok, Instagram, something like that. So that is where our ICP lives. But your ICP might live on Twitter, right? If you're targeting investors or B2B sales or something like that. LinkedIn might be a really great place. Reddit maybe. You have to kind of really analyze who your ICP is and where that ICP lives on the internet. Where do they spend majority of their time? And once you have an understanding of that, you'll be able to better understand how to target them, what medium to use, and how to get their attention, what hooks will work, and what will drive traffic to your product. I think another really important thing that you have to look at when you're dealing with your ICP is understanding where majority of lead gen works for your product. So one common mistake that I see happen a lot is if your product is like a Mac app, let's say, or a web app, it's probably not a very good idea to market that on something like TikTok. TikTok is more driven for immediate purchases, right? Like you want to drive the purchase decision immediately and have them execute the purchase and have it all wrapped up in like a couple of minutes, right? You don't want really long funnels to get them to use your product or purchase your product. So if you are asking them to, you know, they come across your video on TikTok, they have the hook there, they get captivated, they're inquisitive on like what your product actually is. You don't want them to have to open up their laptop, go to the app store on their MacBook, and then type in the name of your app and download it. It's just too much, right? Even having a link is too much because they still have to open their laptop to do it. So you have to really understand where the best lead gen for your product comes from, right? So something like TikTok and Instagram works really well for consumer apps. So if you're building a mobile app, fantastic place to do it. Works really well for e-commerce. If you're selling a product that they can just buy, especially if it's in TikTok shop or something, that is a really, really great place for your lead gen. But if it's something like a Mac app, you probably want to be focusing on things, on platforms where the users, your ICP, are actually already on their laptop. So that would be like Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that, right? And I think this really comes back to your product as well. You have to ensure that you made the right product decision when you're building, when you're kind of going through the motions of where you find your lead gen. Because if you're targeting like Gen Z, like 18 to 25-year-olds, and it's a Mac app, that probably is, there's a disconnect there, right? Like majority of users use their mobile phones for whatever they do day to day on the internet. So if you're targeting Gen Z, who is predominantly phone driven, you probably want to be making a phone app, a mobile app for them, or something they can interact with at least on the phone. So through your marketing, I think you also get a lot of product decisions and you get some like guidance on where you should be directing your product. And that you have to basically have this whole like feedback loop, right? You have to be listening to your marketing, where your marketing's working, where it's falling short, and then that will inform your product decisions. So once you understand your ICP, you know, what platform they live on, you have to figure out how exactly to target them. So a lot of people have become numb to ads, right? So if you have like paid marketing, there's entire cohorts of demographics that have just become numb to that, right? Like they've seen the ads play in front of YouTube and they kind of just completely tune them out, right? So you have to understand what your ICP is actually going to be willing to put up with and how they're going to be digesting information best. So the method that we used for our app was UGC. UGC is user-generated content. And the whole concept is basically you pay a bunch of creators to make organic looking content about your app. And it may not be about the app directly because obviously that feels like an advertisement and that feels icky and people are not going to actually respond very well to that. But if they generate videos that have a very strong hook, that appeal emotionally, or can just draw attention, and then they just kind of mention your app somewhere in maybe the slides or in a couple seconds inside of the video, that drives a lot of traffic. So that's a very popular method that a lot of people are doing now. And that's probably the method you want to go if you're targeting someone on like TikTok or Instagram or something like that. But really what you have to do is you have to understand, how can I best reach my ICP on this platform? How do they respond best? What kind of content do they consume? And how can I appeal to that directly? So depending on your product, most likely the best way to distribute it is going to be UGC. So I'm going to be focusing on that now a little bit. And I want to really go over how to develop your UGC plan, how to best understand how UGC can interact with your product and your ICP. So I think to start off, it's very important to see how UGC directly interacts with your product. So if your product is a mobile app, you could probably just direct the user to your mobile app directly from the UGC content, whether it's like a link in bio or you ask them to search it up or something like that. That will work really, really well because obviously the user's already on their phone and they can just drive the traffic directly. The friction is super low. If you have something like a physical product or a Mac app or whatever, some of these other like harder things because they're not directly on the mobile phone, you probably want to capture an email or something that you can add them to a campaign, you can email them, you can follow up with. You want access to contact them as fast as possible. That's probably your best avenue. If you are something that is a little more complicated, not living directly on the phone, just capture that email, get their contact info as soon as possible, as fast as possible. A big mistake that I see a lot of app founders specifically make with UGC is that they're expecting UGC to drive all of their growth. They can call it organic growth, whatever, but they expect the UGC to be the main driver of all of the content that they push. That doesn't really work. So the proper way to look at this is UGC is more of a testing ground. So UGC, what it allows you to do is post a bunch of different hooks and see what resonates with your ICP organically. So where you're not paying for their eyes, you're not paying for the views, you can actually see what works like that. And that gives you a lot of opportunity to play around with hooks, test what emotions you can invoke in your ICP and how to kind of get their attention with everything, right? But from there, you should see which of your UGC content performs best and use that to do something like paid marketing or something like that. So UGC is essentially like a testing ground. You're basically testing a bunch of different things, seeing what works best, and then any like virality or anything where your post like explodes, that's bonus. If that happens, fantastic, but that's not really what you should be aiming for. So I want to talk about what makes good UGC content. So to start off, UGC content needs to start with a really, really strong hook. If you don't know what a hook is basically something that hooks their attention, hence the name, right? So it's a scroll stopper. It's what the user sees in the first like 1 to 2 seconds of the video that keeps them on that video and stops them from scrolling away. So you need a very strong hook. And a lot of very strong hooks usually are divisive. So if you know your ICP thinks a certain way, adding in some hook that is the opposite of how they think is a really great way to make them stop, right? Make them stop, watch the rest of your video, and get that engagement. Another really strong hook is one that invokes emotion, right? So if it's something that they feel guilty about or something that they wish they were better at, something like that, if you can invoke that emotion in the first 1 to 2 seconds, that is a very, very strong hook to get them to stop. Another really important part of UGC is it has to look natural, right? If it doesn't look natural, it looks like paid marketing, and that I think people generally scroll away unless it's a personality that they already resonate with, they already follow. But at that point, it's influencer marketing. It's not UGC marketing. They're generally going to like swipe away. So you want it to look very natural, and you don't want the main purpose of the UGC content to be about your app, because I think that just smells like sponsored post. It smells like bullshit. There should also be elements within the video that take multiple watches to fully understand. So what that does, it's kind of not intuitive, right? Like if you have text in your video, you want the user to be able to read all the text. That is like an ideal way of posting content online, right? But UGC, you actually want to do the opposite. You want to have them be able to read like half of it or something like that, and then it cut away. Because what that makes the user do that's watching the content is they have to watch the content now again. And that engagement with the post, the time spent on that post, is a positive metric for pretty much every algorithm on social media, whether it's Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. The time spent on the post. So if you maximize the time spent on the post by having these like super quick cuts that don't allow the user to fully ingest the content that you're showing them, forcing them to rewatch it, that is going to absolutely add like fuel to your fire, right? So if you already have a little fire burning, that's going to make it turn into a bonfire, and it's going to go really, really big. You also want to drive normal engagement in general, right? You want people liking it, you want people saving it, you want people commenting on it. Commenting, I think, is probably the best driver. And in that case, you generally want to post something that's divisive, right? Or something that invokes conversation within your ICP. So, like I said with the hook, having that negative or the opposite of what they expect you to say, so whatever your ICP believes, having the opposite and so strongly taking the opposite position will drive them to comment. And those comments are just going to increase your engagement and help your video in the long run. You also want to look at alternative mediums on whatever platform you're on. So an example is Twitter, right? So Twitter is predominantly a text platform. So if you post a picture or you post a video, you, one, are increasing the amount of time that the user spends on the post, especially if it's a video, right? If they watch 30 seconds of the video, even if your video is 6 minutes long, that 30 seconds increases the amount of view time on that one individual post, which helps your algorithm boosting, right? But you also stand out. And I think that is something that's very important, right? If someone is quickly scrolling, they want to see something that stands out. And like posting a video or photo on Twitter is a great way to stand out. Now you see a lot of people doing that, so maybe text is actually the better alternative, but you want to constantly be looking at how to stand out on whatever platform you're on. For TikTok, a fantastic example for a long time was slideshows, right? So TikTok was all just videos, and then suddenly they started introducing slides where it's like the first video is just an image. You know, the first thing you see is just an image, and you have to slide to see the other images. So TikTok was pushing those like crazy. And I think there was an element of where the algorithm was also just naturally boosting those because it was, people were spending more time looking at that first image, wondering why it's not moving. So I think now those are being used a little bit more, but you have to constantly be on the lookout of like, okay, what is changing on the platform and how can I stand out with my content? And I think finally the last piece that makes really good UGC content is properly analyzing what trends are worth hopping onto and which ones are not. So on something like TikTok, there's new trends happening literally every day, right? There's people dancing, there's new music, whatever. There's a bunch of new trends that happen. And good UGC content looks at those trends and adds their own flair to it or incorporates them in the content. It's really important that you're not using old trends though, right? So you have to kind of have your finger on the pulse. So if you are following trends, you have to be very, very actively following the trends. Otherwise, you're going to fall behind and you're going to feel old, right? Like if you're doing a trend from last week that is no longer popping off, it feels old. It just doesn't feel active and new and fresh, right? So you have to constantly be looking, if you were following trends, constantly looking at, okay, what is actually the hot trend right now? And staying active on that the entire time. So another issue that I see a lot of founders fall into with UGC is they're not posting the right volume of content. So the volume of content is very important, right? If you're posting one piece of UGC content a day, that means you have one experiment every single day. As soon as you start posting 6 pieces of UGC content across 6 different accounts, now you have 6 experiments you could run every single day. The experiment can be the person posting it, the location they're posting from, what your hook is, how you structure the video, whatever. Like there's a bunch of things you could test. Now all of a sudden you can have 6 different tests going every single day. So one of the things that worked really well for us was we had 6 different creators post every single day for a month. So by the end of the month, we had 180 pieces of content produced and posted on TikTok. And each one was able to be a separate experiment, right? And we were able to find what works, and we're able to double down on it, try different variations of it. But it really opened our ability to see, okay, what hooks work, swap in different hooks, swap in different structures for video, swap in different opinions for the divisive nature, the divisive feeling for the ICP. You can test a lot of things. And that is really, really important when doing UGC. You need just a large volume of content at the same time so that you can see what works, what doesn't, and you can push the things that work best, and you can just start cutting out the things that don't work well. With this comes a lot of issues, obviously. So if you were working with like 6 creators, now you have 6 individual creators you have to manage every single day. That is a pain in the ass. I mean, we did it. It was a pain. You can always hire an agency to do it. Agencies tend to be kind of expensive, and I think, especially in the beginning, you kind of want a sense for UGC. So you want to be managing it and kind of in the trenches initially, because you're going to learn a lot in that process. Once you've done that for a couple months, maybe you can go and offload it to an agency. But obviously, if your product requires a little bit more of your time involved, then you can just get an agency from the get-go, especially if you have money for it. But managing the creators is a big pain, right? So you have to be on them pretty much every single day. You have to be asking them, hey, did you post a video? Send me the link to the video. You have to be tracking it. And a lot of creators are very unreliable in that sense. We had hired a creator, for an example, for one of our apps in the past. And she was supposed to start posting on a day. She just decided not to post. Didn't inform us why, didn't tell us until we reached out and we're like, hey, what's going on? And she just decided it was her birthday week, so she didn't want to work. And that is like something that actually happens a lot. And creators, unfortunately, are very, they're creatives, right? So like they don't have necessarily the best business sense always. So you have to be very flexible with them, and you have to understand that these are things that are just going to come up while you're working with them. And you have to kind of have that in the back of your mind and how exactly you're going to go about navigating that when it does come up. So now I'm going to go through a bunch of questions I hear very often about UGC with the founders I speak to when they're asking us about, what did we do for it? So one of the top ones is, how much do you pay the creators? So if you go and you speak to a creator, you go find a creator online, something like that, they're going to be quoting you astronomical amounts of money. And what I've found is a lot of these creators don't understand how much their content or time is worth. So obviously, if you're asking for a super complicated video to showcase your product, you're going to have to spend more. But if you are generally making like 7 to 10 second videos, really optimizing just for the mobile, mobile apps or something like that, and you have maybe a repertoire of hooks for them to try already, like they're not having to come up with their own hooks, you should not be paying them very much. So for all of our pieces of content, we paid roughly about $30 to $40 per video. So over the course of a month, it was about $1,000. And we would generally pay them on retainer. So that would be kind of the contract we did, where we would pay half up front and then half at the end of the month upon delivery. So that worked really well for us. Obviously, the prices always fluctuate, so the prices change. But if you just speak to UGC creators, they're going to quote you like $300 for a video, $200 for a video, $100 for a video. That's obscene. It's usually about $30 per video, especially when it's really, really short. What I found has worked a lot is talking to creators and being like, hey, we're going to do this for 1 to 2 months, and then if you perform well, we'll pay you more, you'll have more opportunities, something like that. That works really well because it kind of shows that you're building like a lasting relationship with them. Especially if you don't want to do retainer initially, you want to just pay per video, or you want to just buy 10 videos at once or something like that. Just telling them, hey, do this for me right now. I'm going to pay you on a per video basis, but my intention is if these perform well, that you're going to be on retainer for the following months. Stuff like that bodes really well with them. Another one that I get asked a lot is how to pay the UGC creators. So this is very complicated, and I have a lot of personal anecdotes with this. So obviously I'm Canadian, I'm not American. A lot of UGC creators are American. So they tend to want to be paid with Venmo or Cash App, something of the like. And I was not able to pay them with Cash App or Venmo because we don't have access to that in Canada. So you kind of are like forced to negotiate with PayPal and just be like, hey, I'll send you money on PayPal, or some creators want money wired to them, which is insane. So we actually built a product to solve this. This is not an ad for that product. It lets you upload funds to one wallet, distribute it to the creators, and then we handle all the paperwork of sending the money on whatever platform they want, the invoicing, the contracting, all that stuff. Great platform, you check it out, Creator Check. But that's not the point of this video. The point is that you're gonna have a bunch of different ways that people wanna be paid, and you have to just be flexible with options. So you have to know in advance that you are gonna spend days sending money with PayPal, sending money with Cash App, sending money with Venmo, doing manual calculations for each individual creator. It's gonna be a pain in the ass. But you just have to kind of know that. Extending from that, it's also, okay, how do I actually pay the creators? So I told you that we did like a per video basis. That was most of what we did. But some people offer like bonuses, or they pay per views or something like that. So there's a bunch of these different options that you can do, right? You can do retainer, pay per video. You could do like a fixed rate where you pay half up front, half later, CPM basis. So for every 1,000 views they get, you pay some cents, right? So if they get 1 million, they get some fraction of that in dollars. You can also do like bonus structures. I've seen a lot. So if you get 100 to 500,000 views, we're going to pay you this much. If you get 500,000 to 1 million, we're going to pay you this much. So those are very common. And it's really just like you have to negotiate with a creator. If this is your first time doing UGC, you should probably just do like pay per video or fixed rate, because I think it will get very expensive very quickly. But once you have a relationship with a creator, you know they perform very well, you know you can rely on them to actually post and do what they say they're going to do, then I say you can probably start branching into these other like bonus structures, assuming that your revenue and everything makes sense for that. How to manage UGC creators is also a massive question. What I've found works best is just getting their WhatsApp and just being able to text them. Just having that direct line of contact with them helps a lot. And you're able just to shoot them a message and be like, hey, why didn't this work? Why haven't you posted? What's wrong, right? And getting them to send you their content every single day is also really important, because it's intent that they have to do, right? They have to send you this content every single day. They know there's this agreement that they have to do. So just having that structure is really important, and it will help you stay on top of them over time. So you also need to figure out where to find UGC creators. And that is a big question I asked myself at one point, and I hear all the time as well. So what I've found works the best for finding UGC creators is there's a hashtag, and you can go on TikTok. It's hashtag UGC creator, or creators with an S. Scroll through, you can usually DM a lot of those people. The thing is, those people are going to be wanting to get paid a little bit more, especially if they come up near the top of the search, because they're established UGC creators, and they're probably working with larger brands and advertising specific products with more involved video processes, right? I found that Twitter works really well. So if you follow that same UGC, hashtag UGC creator, you go on Twitter, you can usually find a lot of creators on Twitter, and they are usually a little, like they'll quote you super high, but you can talk them back down to $30 a video or whatever. They're usually a little easier to work with, and they're trying to like cut their teeth and just get started in the industry. So they don't have all that like, I feel like I should be paid a bunch of money per video and all that whole kind of motivation behind their work. Another really great place is there's this whole marketplace, like there's UGC marketplaces that you can search up, and you can hire creators, you can hire people that work in universities, so like the students in universities, and you can just hire them, and they will be really cheap. What I've found issues with that is those creators tend to be the least reliable, because usually just like students that are just doing this to make a couple extra bucks. So you're gonna pay very little, like you might be paying like $10 a video or something like that. But those creators generally are not gonna be the best performing. They're not gonna be trying the best. They're gonna want script reads, so you're gonna have to write the script for all of them, which maybe is something you wanna do, because it's good practice to learn how to format these videos and how to create the hooks. But those creators are not gonna be the most creative bunch. They're gonna be just basically like guns for hire, right? Like you just pay them to produce content and they will do that, and they'll do that very well. So another thing that a lot of app founders ask me is it worth having content approval before posting? Generally, I say no, especially if you're like a very early app, because I mean, if you disagree with the content, you'll just remove it, right? There's no brand for you to tarnish. There's no name for them to ruin. If you're in the beginning, like you have no name to ruin, right? So I generally don't think it's that important. I just have these creators push the videos themselves onto accounts that they run on your behalf. And if there's an issue, you just contact them and be like, hey, take that down, right? It's really, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So this is now probably the biggest thing that I get asked a lot, or it's one of those things that if you don't know, this is something you should be asking about, and it's warming up TikTok accounts. So the concept of warming up an account can be kind of confusing for people, but the whole concept is you want TikTok specifically. TikTok is, this is really just centered around TikTok. You want them to think that you are a human posting this, right? You don't want to be perceived as a bot, because your videos will get capped. There's a couple caps on TikTok. It's like 100 views, maybe like 600, something like that. There's a couple caps that you get stuck at, and that's when they're trialing your videos. If they don't think you're a human, you're not gonna get past that 100 cap. If you're lucky, it's probably a little bit less. You have to warm up the account. The way you do that is whatever your ICP would be searching for on TikTok, what content they would be consuming on TikTok, you wanna be finding that, watching that, interacting with it, in a way a human does. So you want to swipe, watch a full video to its completion. Maybe you want to pull it down to have the 2x speed. You want to be going into comments and liking comments, maybe leaving comments. Leaving comments is a really strong indicator. You want to have like a photo, obviously. You want to have a bio. And you want to be doing that for like initially for like 6 to 7 days right off the jump, I think is usually the right amount of time before you post any content. You want also you want that account to be based wherever your ICP is based. So if you are targeting like the American market, you want the IP address of the phone that is signed into TikTok to be in the US. And you don't want to use VPNs. They generally know when you're using a VPN. Mobile data is usually the best. So like even residential proxies, if you get into all that kind of confusing stuff, residential proxies don't even really work that well. So there's a whole element to that of like warming up before you start posting. And then every single day before you post, you generally want to use TikTok for at least 10 minutes, probably more. And then throughout the day, you also want to be using TikTok. You basically have to be a user of TikTok in order for TikTok to push your content. And that's warming up content, warming up accounts. So what I've done myself is I just have like TikTok loaded up on my phone. I leave it to the side and I just scroll. And I leave it running while I'm doing something else. You scroll, click comment section, you like a couple comments, you follow some accounts, stuff like that. You gotta just be playing that game, that whole like cat and mouse game. So now that you've done all that with UGC, now it's time to take that UGC content and run paid ads on it. So paid ads are from like Meta or TikTok. Those are usually the best performing for like mobile, but you can also do Twitter ads, you could do Facebook ads, you could do really whatever you want. And the whole concept of the paid ads is that now that you've done UGC content, you've seen what organically works. So if you have like 180 videos posted over the course of a month, at the end of that month, you see out of those 180 videos what your top 10 performers are. What you can do then is take those top 10 performers and run them as creatives on Meta, on TikTok, and you can have Meta and TikTok optimized further for like reaching your demographic and all that. But what the UGC has allowed you to do is see what organically works really well, which is going to save you a lot of money in the long run for Meta ads and TikTok ads and stuff like that, because now you're not paying to test this content. You've already done the testing for free. So when you are running on Meta ads or TikTok ads, they have optimizations that they run inside of their ad network, and it's to your favor. So they basically try to find the best demographic for your content, your mobile app, whatever. The way they do this is by having a closed feedback loop. So user sees the ad for your mobile app. They click on it because they're intrigued. They get brought to the App Store. They download the app, and then maybe they go through onboarding. They sign up for a trial. They pay for the app, whatever. All of those major things. They downloaded the app. They completed your onboarding. They signed up for a trial. They're paying for the app. Those are all opportunities for you to send events. Those events can then be digested by Meta or TikTok, and they will now say, okay, so the person that we showed this ad to actually went through and completed the whole process of whatever you're optimizing for, right? Are you optimizing for installs, for trials, for paid conversions, whatever? They now see the event has been triggered, and they go, okay, this user that we showed the ad to is a perfect example of the demographic that this app needs. So we're going to show it to more people like this person. And because they have all the data about these people, they know who is similar to that individual. And they slowly build out this network, and then they kind of design this like target demographic around what is going to perform best for your app. So in that case, you want to be making sure that your app is optimized for that. So if it's a mobile app, you want to be firing off these events at the right time. You want to make sure that the events are working properly. You're not firing them prematurely, and everything is actually being converted properly. If it's like for trial or conversion or whatever, that will then optimize for Meta ads and TikTok. And Meta and TikTok will go through kind of a process, a break-in period. I think it's maximum 7 days or a certain amount of successful events. And during that time, it's learning who your demographic is. And then once it has a really good understanding of that, that's when you start firing off your ad spend. So within your app, you also want to set up something where you can understand where the traffic is coming from. So if the traffic is being driven from Meta ads or TikTok, you want to know that inside of your app, right? It might even be organic, right? Like people might be seeing your UGC and just searching up the app and downloading it. So you want to be using something like AppsFlyer, where you can actually attribute that data back, and you can see what is performing best for you. Because what this will allow you to do is say, okay, Meta is driving this many users, TikTok is driving 2 times the amount of users. I'm not going to spend as much on Meta. I'm going to put more money on my TikTok spend. It allows you to A/B test, see what works best for you in the long run. And it just gives you more data. At the end of the day, the more data you have, the better off you are. So now that you're running paid ads, you have to understand your audience, and you need to understand if you are actually reaching them. So pretty much the best KPIs you can look for in this regard are your CPI, your CPT, or your CPP. Your CPI is cost per install, cost per trial, cost per purchase, or cost per conversion, whatever you want to call it. Those 3 are your best metrics. So if you are running Meta ads and you're targeting like cost per install to be as low as possible because you're trying to drive installs to your app, you want that to be very cheap. So for PraseScreen, for an example, the app that we built and sold, our cost per install for a while was like 40 cents, which is insane. Like that is performing amazingly well. And that's because we tested the content. It was a very opportune time. It was around New Year's Eve. So like a lot of people had these New Year's resolutions, which are apps slotted in with really, really well. And then over time that will fluctuate. It will go up and down. And it's depending on like who Meta has to show the ads to and how much they have to show the ad, right? How much does it cost to actually get them to click it? So cost per install is usually the cheapest. Cost per trial, cost per conversion can be kind of interchangeable. Cost per conversion or pay is usually the highest, right? But you have to look at those 3 metrics. So if the cost per purchase is exceeding the amount that you make on the user, that's probably not very good, right? If your cost per install is really, really expensive and then your conversion rate off of the installs is really low, you're probably paying too much for your ad spend, right? So you want to be looking at your return on ad spend, and that's generally dictated by your CPI, CPT, or CPP. And from there, you can kind of build off of that and understand if your ads are working well. You also want to play around with your demographic and your target. So Meta, for an example, gives you an astronomical amount of configurability for who you're targeting your ads to. You don't want to be too restrictive. You also don't want to be too broad, right? So posting UGC will tell you a lot about the kinds of people that are interacting with your app. You'll be able to pull those analytics from the TikTok accounts, and you'll be able to see, you know what, 18 to 25-year-olds are generally the people that are watching the content. You can then target those people specifically within Meta ads. Not to say that you want to do that across the board. Maybe that's just your highest spend campaign, and maybe you want to run a couple campaigns in parallel. But there's all these tricks that you want to play with, like targeting your demographics and just targeting your audience specifically. And that is just trial and error over a long period of time. A question that you're going to come across a lot that you're going to be asking yourself is, when your ads are not performing well, is it because it's a bad creative, or is it because it's bad targeting? Something that might come up is a question if your creatives are bad or if your targeting is bad. It's going to come up if your ROAS is not very high, if your campaigns are not performing very well. And that is really a question that can only be answered through experimentation. So you have to just experiment. You have to run multiple campaigns, and you have to run those same creatives across different target audiences. And generally at different times, right? You don't want all the campaigns running at the same time. And from there, you'll learn if it's a bad creative, or if you're targeting the wrong audience, or, if it's a bad product, really, right? Like if the product is just not resonating with people, then naturally your campaigns are not going to perform well. So if you had like some organic growth through your UGC content, then maybe you can say like, maybe my product's working, it's just these like creatives or the target audience, but only way to really learn is through experimentation. So a lot of questions that we get asked regarding paid ads, because it's kind of like this black hole. The top one is, how do you learn how to use Meta ads? If you have ever looked at the Meta ads console, you see there's a million switches, a million buttons, there's a million different configuration options. It is incredibly confusing if you're brand new to this, which you probably are, right? So how do you learn? How do you get comfortable? How do you actually pilot this thing so that you reach the right audience for your creatives and you're not wasting your money? Pretty much the best resource that we have found and we have used is this guy, Ben Heath, on YouTube. You should definitely check him out. He has any question you could have, he has an answer to probably in his catalog on YouTube. So that is who I would highly recommend you watch for that. Another question is, how much ad spend should you start with, right? How much ad spend should you use on your campaigns? So during that training period where you are running for like 7 days or up to a certain amount of events, I think it's like 50 or whatever, you generally want to be spending about $100 a day. $100 a day is going to be a pretty good metric, pretty good base for you to figure out if it's going up or down, what your ROAS is, and also gives Meta enough money to work with to actually train properly. Because the worst thing would be you didn't spend enough money, it got to the end of the 7 days, and it found like a shitty audience because it just didn't have the opportunity to show it to enough people. So you definitely have to spend during that time. After your training period is done, we still did $100 a day, and I think that's a really good place to be, because $100 a day is generally going to give you a pretty good base to figure out if it's working or not. You can check out your ROAS. You can learn a lot from that. Then from there, you can scale up and down depending on whatever factors your app has, right? Like, is the campaign performing well? Are you making money? What's your return on ad spend? All that. So this is a hard truth that we learned. Ad spend does not always scale great. So if you ask, if I have an app, I have a campaign that I'm spending $100 on, I have a 2x ROAS. If I go and spend $200 on the campaign, does that mean my ROAS is going to stay at 2? The answer is no. It could, definitely, but it doesn't necessarily mean it scales linearly like that. So I have seen ROAS go up when you spend more money. I've seen it go down when you spend more money. And I think more often than not, it goes down when you spend more money. Hopefully it's not a super dramatic drop, but it definitely happens. So whenever you are scaling your ad spend, you want to scale it slightly in a small increment. So if you're at like $100, maybe you want to do $50 more, have it 150, collect like 3 days of data, see how your ROAS has changed with that increase, and then either increase another $50 or $100 if it did really well, and kind of just do these small increments, and then make sure you collect enough data over the course of 3 days so that you can actually understand how this is affecting your ROAS. So another mistake I see a lot of people make is, let's say you have a campaign that has like a 1.1, 1.2x ROAS. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. It's making you money, so you're happy, obviously. You want to experiment, you want to try other things, and you want to divert your ad spend, or at least a portion of it, to another campaign. One mistake I see a lot of people do is that they turn off a campaign. That is probably the worst thing you could do. So for whatever reason, Meta is a black box. Don't really know how it works. It is what it is. You have to play by the rules for that reason. And what we have noticed is over time, it makes more sense for you to just get close to $0 ad spend, but don't turn off the ad. Leave it going. Unless your campaign is performing horribly, like you're making negative ROAS, then obviously turn it off, right? It's not going to perform better. But if you had a positive ROAS, reduce the spend, leave it there, don't turn it off. Just keep it going. It's counterintuitive, but you have to keep it running. Then you go do your other experiments and you can come back, or if your other experiments are performing better, then turn it off, right? Only turn it off when you know you're not going to go back to it. So a great hack that comes up a lot that a lot of people don't necessarily know about is the Meta Ads library. So if you see someone advertising on Meta, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever, there is a public repository of all the ads that they are actively running at that time. And it's a great place for you to find other companies in your niche that are running ads, see which hooks are performing best for them, and then copy them. A caveat of that is a lot of these companies will run like kind of counterintelligence, where they will leave Meta ads running that are not performing very well. This is especially if they're a large company. They'll leave ads that are not performing well active just so that they pop up in that repository. So other people that come and look at it, you just see a list of all the ads that are running, the content that is, the creative that's associated with that ad. You don't see how much ad spend they're putting towards it. So some of the longest running ads on a page will be ones that they just left there. Because if someone doesn't know about this trick, they'll come to the repository, they'll scroll to the bottom and see, okay, this is the longest running ad. It must be performing or else they would have turned it off. That's not the case. They could just be lying to you to try to trick you. So you definitely want to find like some anecdotal evidence. So if you have seen this company's Meta ads before, like you've actually seen them, those are probably the Meta ads you want to focus on to look at like the hooks and everything. The other ones, it's plus or minus depending if it's true or not that they're performing well. So the last piece of marketing your product is your product itself. So you need to make sure that obviously, listen, you made a product, your goal is to convert, right? Your goal is to get paid. So you need to make sure that the funnel to get to that conversion point is structured perfectly, that you have information about every step there, and that the user is being simply driven to make that purchase. You don't want any complications, any confusion in that whole process. So the first thing you have to do for that funnel is you have to set up analytics. You got to see what screens people spend the most time on, if they tap on buttons that are not the button that they're supposed to tap on, if they get stuck somewhere, if API in your onboarding is like buggy or something like that. You need all that information. What that will tell you is you'll be able to see, okay, users are like falling off on this screen. Users are getting stuck here. Users don't know what button to click. All those moments are moments of friction and reasons why people will not continue down your funnel to see your paywall, to see the point where they can actually convert to a paying user. These are called like leaky bucket moments. So you need to figure out where your bucket's leaking from and do your best to patch those throughout the entire thing. Especially if you're running Meta ads, because every time a user drops off, if you're doing like cost per install because you're trying to get the amount of installs for your app up because that makes the most economic sense or whatever, like all of a sudden now these leaky buckets, sure, they installed the app, the event was triggered, Meta says, hey, I did my job, but then they fall off 2 screens later. Meta doesn't have that information about that, and you just spent money on a user that fell off, right? Your conversion is going to tank because of that. So you want to be able to identify the entire process through your funnel and see where issues arise in it. So if your conversion rate is also really low, you got to look at, are you making a compelling enough reason for the user to convert? So a mistake I see a lot of app founders make specifically is they offer like freemium models, or they have like a free aspect of the app and like certain paid features or something like that. That is not always the most compelling thing. Like sometimes you want to just hit them with a hard paywall and you say, listen, pay to use the app or not. Once again, it's counterintuitive because you think, oh, maybe if a user uses the app, they'll convert later. Pretty much never happens. Hit them with the hard paywall and just make a very compelling case for them to convert. So if you are already hitting them with a hard paywall and they're not converting, that's when you have to start looking at your paywall. And you have to say, okay, am I doing a good enough job explaining what the features are in onboarding before the paywall? The paywall itself, am I explaining what they're going to get on the paywall? Am I showcasing the amount of reviews I have, the stars? Are you making a compelling enough case for someone to hand you money is really the question. And you learn that through the conversion. So if your funnel is all set now, right, like you have all the analytics, you patch all the leaky parts, and now the paywall hits and they're just not converting, you got to look backwards and you got to say, okay, what am I missing in my onboarding to make them, like massage them, make them feel good enough to hand me their money by the conversion point. Another mistake that a lot of app founders make is they don't show enough paywalls. Like app founders think that it gets annoying to show paywalls all the time. And yeah, it is a little annoying, but you have to kind of poke at the user to get them to pay you. So a personal anecdote from PraseScreen is we showed during onboarding, our onboarding was maybe like 8 screens, 9 screens total. And like, as soon as the user downloaded the app, there's like 3 information screens. They hit next, next, next. Less than 30 seconds to get through those 3 screens. We hit them with the paywall immediately. Asked them to start paying. We had that skippable, unskippable. We fluctuated between the two, but in a lot of cases it was skippable. So they could skip, continue through onboarding, go through our onboarding. After onboarding, hit them with another paywall. That was our conversion point, right? They got this far, they've seen how the app works, hit them, ask them to pay you money. Maybe they pay, maybe they don't. If they don't, they hit skip button, another paywall comes up right after. That's your abandoned cart paywall. We offered like some little discount to them. Showing more paywalls and be more aggressive with the paywalls will actually convert better. Counterintuitive, but every opportunity you have to show the user a paywall, you should. That is just what you should do, because you'll be surprised how many of them convert just by seeing a paywall. Another great tactic that you can use is price laddering. So price laddering is basically presenting the user with options. I think the best working is 2, but maybe 3. And it's basically like a base that they could pay for, but it's not fantastic value. So in PraseScreen's case, it was like a weekly subscription, which weekly is already kind of weird. Weekly subscription of $8 a week. That is a lot of money, right? Like 8 times 52, it's a lot of money. The next option was yearly for $50. So all of a sudden, yearly for $50 doesn't sound that bad next to weekly for $8. Having that price laddering means users are now no longer comparing the price of your app to not paying at all. They're now comparing it to a really high price that you have put into their mind, right? $8. So they hear $8 a week, they're like, shit, that's really expensive. They see $50. Suddenly it's not that bad. $50 for a year, that kind of makes sense. There's a lot of companies that do this. Apple's famous for doing this. That price laddering you definitely want to play with. And there's a lot of A/B testing that you can do within that price laddering, but that is something that you really want to incorporate in your paywalls. So now the final part of this entire how to distribute your app in 2026, and this is probably the most important thing, is you have to look at the cost that it costs to get a user onto your app, your cost of user acquisition, and compare it to the long-term value of your customer. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. So if the average user that you onboard sticks around for like 3 months and it's a $5 a month subscription, they churn after 3 months, so you can pretty much guarantee you're gonna make about $15 on average for every user, but the cost to get that user to convert to paid is like $20, you're losing $5 on every single user. There's probably not that many marketing things you could change to convert that and make that better. Obviously, you can play with a bunch of the stuff that we talked about, but at the end of the day, if you have experimented and it's just the economics are not working at the end, you have to pivot your app. Like, that is a product issue. It's not a marketing issue. And I think that is also something that a lot of app founders get confused with. They think, like marketing can change everything. But at the end of the day, if your product is shit, people are not going to convert. So you could experiment, try all these things, but like always have that base truth of like, okay, if it is just not economically viable, then it's probably just not a very good app. I should pivot and try something else. Because the lessons that you learn building out this whole marketing pipeline, you can apply to basically anything, right? You can apply it to e-commerce, you can apply it to like info products or mobile apps or Mac apps, whatever. So you've learned skills, congratulations. You have a lot of experience now in the marketing. Now you just have to swap out the app, right? And that's not that big of a deal. Once you have all this marketing understood, swapping out the app is the easy part, right? So swap out the app, keep trying different things if the marketing is not working, and just be honest with yourself. Because I think a lot of people get hung up where it's like, this idea is my baby. Throw it out, try something new if it's not working. Because at the end of the day, your goal is to try to make money, I think, right? Swap it out. So that's basically it. That is my guide of how I would distribute a mobile app or a product in 2026. Hopefully you've learned a lot. There's a lot of lessons in here that I learned from doing it myself, from talking to a bunch of different people, from helping other app founders do this themselves. If this is something that interests you, feel free to hit me up. We can chat and I can see if there's something that we can help with. Otherwise, I hope the video was informative enough. Peace.